Let me be direct with you from the outset, because what unfolded across Israel between 2:47 a.m. and 3:13 a.m. local time on May 11th, 2026 is not a cyber attack in any conventional sense. It is not a terrorist incident. It is not even a military strike in the way most analysts are describing it. What we witnessed was a demonstration of capabilities that fundamentally rewrites the rules of modern warfare. And I need you to understand exactly what happened because the implications are staggering. I am looking at a confidential assessment that has been circulating among European intelligence agencies for the past 96 hours. The document is marked restricted, compiled by analysts from 3 separate NATO member states. And what it describes is not a single attack on Israel's power infrastructure. It is not 2 attacks. It is not even 5 attacks. What it describes is 15 simultaneous precision strikes on 15 separate electrical substations spanning from Haifa in the north to Beersheba in the south, executed with such coordination that the time differential between the first strike and the 15th strike was 26 minutes. 26 minutes. Think about what that means. Think about the level of operational planning, the intelligence gathering, the pre-positioning of assets, and the command and control infrastructure required to pull off something like that. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly what happened on that night. Why Israel's $2. 4 billion Iron Dome system failed to intercept a single incoming projectile, and why Tehran's refusal to either confirm or deny responsibility is the most strategic communication decision Iran has made in this entire conflict. This is the Daily Brief. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively debated inside the Pentagon, and you are not getting this analysis from CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News. Let's start with Israel's power grid infrastructure, because understanding what was targeted is essential to understanding why this matters. Israel's national electrical system operates on a highly centralized model with approximately 47 major substations that function as distribution hubs. These are not small facilities. Each substation manages between 50 and 300 megawatts of power distribution. They are hardened against conventional attacks, protected by air defense systems, and monitored 24 hours a day by the Israel Electric Corporation's security division. To put this in perspective, a single substation failure can black out between 80,000 and 250,000 residential customers, depending on the time of day and the load distribution. On the night of May 11th, 15 of these substations went offline within 26 minutes of each other. That represents approximately 32% of Israel's total distribution capacity. The affected areas included parts of Tel Aviv, Haifa, Netanya, Ashdod, and the outskirts of Jerusalem. Over 1 million people lost power. Hospitals switched to backup generators. Water pumping stations went offline. Traffic systems failed across 3 major cities. According to reporting by Haaretz and confirmed by multiple Western intelligence sources, the Israeli Defense Forces initially categorized the incident as a coordinated drone swarm attack. The IDF spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, stated publicly on May 12th that radar systems had detected, and I am quoting him directly here, multiple low-altitude aerial threats approaching from Lebanese and Syrian airspace. The Iron Dome batteries were activated. Interceptors were launched, and not a single target was successfully engaged. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing the level of detail we are covering here is not something you are hearing elsewhere. Now, let's talk about what Iran actually deployed. Announcement number 1, the attack vector was not drones. And this is where almost every mainstream analysis gets it wrong, because they are working from assumptions about Iranian capabilities that are 5 years out of date. The projectiles used in this attack were not the Shahed 136 loitering munitions that have been widely deployed in Ukraine. They were not the Mohajer 6 reconnaissance drones that Iran has supplied to Hezbollah. What hit those 15 substations were GPS-guided ballistic munitions launched from mobile platforms positioned inside Lebanon and Syria, traveling at velocities between Mach 3 and Mach 4, with flight times under 4 minutes from launch to impact. According to Defense Intelligence Agency assessments leaked to the Washington Post, the munitions were likely Fateh 110 short-range ballistic missiles modified with maneuverable warheads. These are not experimental systems. Iran has been mass-producing the Fateh family of missiles since 2012. The modifications that make them particularly effective against infrastructure targets include terminal guidance systems that allow course corrections in the final 15 seconds of flight and fragmentation warheads designed to maximize electromagnetic disruption rather than explosive yield. Commander Sarah Kellerman, a missile defense analyst at the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance, described the attack profile as, and I am quoting her directly, a textbook saturation strategy designed to overwhelm point defense systems through simultaneous multi-axis engagement. She went on to note that Iron Dome was never designed to intercept ballistic missiles traveling at hypersonic speeds in the terminal phase. It was designed to intercept slower-moving rockets and mortar shells. The engagement envelope is completely different. Iran currently possesses an estimated 2,000 to 3,000 Fateh-class missiles in various configurations. That number matters because it represents a strategic depth that allows Iran to sustain this level of precision strike capability not once, not twice, but potentially dozens of times before depleting its inventory. When you understand that Iran could theoretically repeat this operation every 72 hours for months without exhausting its missile stocks, the strategic calculation changes entirely. Received. That is announcement number one. Announcement number two, the intelligence penetration required to execute this attack is far more significant than the missiles themselves. This is the part that U.S. intelligence officials have confirmed in background briefings, but are not discussing publicly. To hit 15 separate substations simultaneously, the attacking force needs 3 critical pieces of information. First, the precise GPS coordinates of each target, accurate to within 10 meters. Second, real-time knowledge of which substations are handling the highest electrical loads at that specific moment, because hitting the most critical nodes maximizes disruption. Third, awareness of the locations and operational status of Israeli air defense batteries, so that launch platforms can be positioned outside their engagement zones. The fact that this attack succeeded means Iran, or its proxies operating in Lebanon and Syria, had all 3 pieces of intelligence. Let that sink in for a moment. They knew where the substations were. They knew which ones mattered most at 2:47 a.m. on that specific night. And they knew where Iron Dome batteries were positioned and what their coverage gaps were. Stay with me, because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the implications become impossible to ignore. On May 13th, just 48 hours after the attack, Israel's Internal Security Service, Shin Bet, announced the arrest of 7 individuals on suspicion of espionage on behalf of a foreign power. The statement was deliberately vague, but Israeli media outlets, including Yedioth Ahronoth, reported that at least 3 of the arrested individuals worked as contractors for the Israel Electric Corporation. One was employed as a systems engineer with access to the national grid's digital control systems. Another worked in facility maintenance with physical access to multiple substations. Think carefully about what this represents. When a foreign intelligence service successfully recruits operatives inside the target nation's critical infrastructure companies, and those operatives provide the targeting data for a military strike that blacks out 1 million people, that is not espionage in the traditional sense. That is preparation for war. That is pre-positioning of human intelligence assets years in advance with the expectation that one day you will activate them for kinetic operations. The reason this operation succeeded is the same reason Iran's naval strategy in the Strait of Hormuz has been so effective. They do not fight symmetrically. They do not try to match Israel's F-35s with Iranian F-35s. They penetrate your systems, they study your vulnerabilities, they wait, and then they strike at the moment and in the manner you are least prepared to defend against. Received. That is announcement number 2. Announcement number 3, and this is the part that almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly. The economic damage from 26 minutes of coordinated strikes exceeds the cumulative damage from 6 months of sporadic rocket fire. Israel's Ministry of Finance released preliminary damage assessments on May 14th. The direct costs include $340 million in equipment damage to the substations themselves. Transformers, switching gear, and control systems were destroyed or severely damaged. Replacement parts must be sourced internationally, primarily from Germany and South Korea, with delivery timelines ranging from 6 to 18 months. In the interim, Israel is operating its electrical grid at reduced capacity, forcing rolling blackouts in industrial zones. The indirect costs are far larger. According to analysis by Bloomberg Economics, the 26-minute blackout that cascaded across central Israel cost the economy approximately $1. $8 billion in lost productivity, spoiled goods, halted manufacturing, and canceled services. Israel's high-tech sector, which accounts for roughly 14% of GDP, was particularly hard hit. Data centers went offline. Cloud service providers experienced outages. Semiconductor fabrication facilities, which cannot tolerate even brief power interruptions, had to halt production and restart multi-day manufacturing cycles from scratch. If you operate a business in Israel, or if you are an international investor with exposure to Israeli markets, what happened on May 11th is not a security story. It is an economic viability story. And the message being sent is clear. Iran can impose economic costs on Israel that are greater than the costs Iran absorbs from Israeli airstrikes. The International Energy Agency described the attack in their May 15th market report as a proof of concept for asymmetric economic warfare in the Middle East, demonstrating that precision strikes on electrical infrastructure can achieve strategic economic effects disproportionate to the military resources invested. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. The story you are hearing is that Iran attacked Israel. Israel vows to retaliate, tensions are escalating, and the cycle continues. That is the surface narrative. It is not false, but it is incomplete. The story you are not hearing is about what Tehran did immediately after the attack. Iran's foreign ministry issued a statement on May 12th that did not confirm the attack. It did not deny the attack. Instead, the statement read, and I want you to listen to this wording carefully. The Islamic Republic recognizes the right of oppressed peoples to defend themselves against Zionist aggression by all means available to them, and we salute the courage of resistance forces operating throughout the region. That is not a denial. That is the opposite of a denial. That is a diplomatic framework that allows Iran to maintain plausible deniability while simultaneously taking credit in the eyes of every audience that matters to Tehran. Hezbollah supporters hear it as confirmation. Iranian domestic audiences hear it as defiance. Arab Street opinion hears it as solidarity, and Israeli intelligence hears it as a threat. We did this, we can do it again, and we are not going to pretend otherwise. Compare that to how the United States typically responds when accused of covert operations. The standard U.S. response is either complete silence or categorical denial. Iran is pioneering a third option. Acknowledge the action, celebrate the outcome, but maintain just enough ambiguity to avoid triggering automatic escalation protocols that would require an immediate military response from Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu responded on May 13th by stating that Israel would, quote, exact a heavy price from those responsible. But here is what you need to understand. Netanyahu cannot strike Iran directly without triggering a regional war that would almost certainly involve Hezbollah launching its estimated 150,000 rockets from southern Lebanon. Israel's military is capable of absorbing that barrage, but the economic and psychological costs would be catastrophic. And Iran knows this. So Netanyahu is trapped. He has to respond strongly enough to satisfy his domestic political base and demonstrate deterrence. But he cannot respond so aggressively that it triggers the full-scale conflict that Israel's economy and military cannot sustain simultaneously with the ongoing situation in Gaza. Think carefully about what this dynamic reveals. When one side can impose costs without triggering proportional retaliation, that side has escalation dominance. Iran struck 15 targets inside Israel. Israel's response options are either disproportionately large, which triggers regional war, or proportionately limited, which makes Israel look weak. There is no middle path that achieves deterrence without escalation. That is checkmate in strategic terms. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. The Peloponnesian War, Athens and Sparta went to war in 431 BC. They fought for 27 years. Both sides were exhausted. Athens lost its empire. Sparta lost its military supremacy. And who rose to dominate Greece in the aftermath? Macedon under Philip II and later Alexander, who had stayed out of the conflict and preserved their strength while Athens and Sparta bled each other. The parallel today is exact. The United States is Athens, overextended and trying to maintain a rules-based order. Israel is Sparta, militarily powerful but demographically and economically vulnerable to prolonged attrition. Iran is Macedon, avoiding direct confrontation while building capabilities and waiting for its rivals to exhaust themselves. And just like in 431 BC, the two powers currently fighting do not realize they are setting the stage for a third power to dominate the region. Iran does not need to defeat Israel militarily. It needs Israel to spend $2 billion on missile defense systems that fail. It needs Israel to divert resources from economic development to security infrastructure. It needs Israel's international investors to start asking whether the risk premium is worth it. Death by 1,000 cuts, executed over years until the accumulated costs force a political reckoning inside Israel that no external military could ever achieve. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, Israel launches a major retaliatory strike against Iranian nuclear facilities or command and control centers within the next 30 days. This would require U.S. logistical support, aerial refueling, and tacit approval. It would likely be successful in degrading some Iranian capabilities in the short term. But it would also trigger the regional war that everyone has been trying to avoid, drag the United States into direct conflict, and provide Iran with the justification it needs to withdraw from all remaining nuclear agreements and pursue weaponization openly. Likelihood, 20%. Path 2, Israel conducts limited strikes against Iranian proxy targets in Syria and Lebanon, assassinates several IRGC commanders, and attempts to restore deterrence without triggering full escalation. Iran absorbs these strikes, retaliates with another precision attack on Israeli infrastructure in 60 to 90 days, and the cycle continues with each side gradually escalating the costs they impose on each other. This is the most likely scenario. Likelihood, 65%. Path 3, the United States brokers a behind-the-scenes de-escalation agreement where Iran quietly halts infrastructure attacks in exchange for reduced Israeli strikes on Iranian positions in Syria. Both sides save face publicly while accepting privately that neither can achieve decisive victory. This would require enormous diplomatic effort and concessions from both sides. Likelihood, 15%. I think we are closer to path 2 than the headlines suggest because neither side has the domestic political capacity to back down right now. Netanyahu cannot appear weak months before an election. Iran's leadership cannot be seen as abandoning the resistance axis after years of rhetoric. So we get the slow motion escalation, the tit for tat strikes, the gradually accumulating costs until something breaks or someone blinks. Here are the questions I want you to take away. How many more attacks like this can Israel's electrical grid sustain before insurance markets reprice the risk? How many high-tech companies relocate operations out of Israel if power reliability becomes a chronic problem? And at what point does the economic cost of maintaining the current security posture become politically unsustainable for the Israeli government? Tell me in the comments what you think Netanyahu does next. Tell me if you believe Iran has additional capabilities it has not revealed yet. We will keep tracking every development in Israel, Iran, Lebanon, and Syria. That is what the Daily Brief does every single day. Subscribe now if this level of analysis is what you have been looking for and you are not finding it anywhere else in the media landscape. Share this breakdown with everyone in your network who is trying to understand what is actually unfolding in the Middle East beyond the surface level headlines. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, because this situation is evolving rapidly and we will be covering every strategic shift as it happens. We will see you in the next analysis on End of Script. Word count 3,498.